Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. I'm Bill, the company's expert, and this is the live stream I do a couple of times weekly where we talk about the hiring process. We talk about job search, but we talk about it from a particular perspective, and that is the gritty reality, not the theory about how it's supposed to work, but the reality of how it does end up actually working in practice. So if you are a job seeker, you are between jobs, or you're just someone trying to figure out how this stuff works, what the hell should you be doing, that kind of thing, you come to the right place. This is basically a Q&A, so you get a chance to ask me questions. If you are a subscriber to my channel for any amount of time, you can ask me questions. Let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with, and I will do my best to help you out. This episode is episode number 77. This is called Doing Everything Right, Still Not Hired. Here's why. Live Q&A. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So send in your questions and I will do my best to answer them and help you out. This is an incredibly traumatic process for a lot of people. It's never easy being between jobs or worrying about this stuff, especially when you don't really understand how everything works. There's people saying to do things and you're trying to do them, but it's not really turning out the way you were hoping and all this kind of stuff. So that's what you're here to talk about. I see there's 23 people here. Thank you for being here. Let me know what your deal is and let's talk about it. Also, if you are wanting to, while I'm waiting for the questions to come in, if you want to take the plunge with me and learn this stuff from beginning to end, not just for posted jobs and how to get those, but for hidden jobs and how to get those, check out that course right there, Get Hired, link in the description. If you want to go deeper than that, you want to, maybe you're not between jobs, maybe you're in a role, but you want to climb the ladder, you want to get promoted. You're interested. God, I can't talk. You're interested in tacking on some professional communication skills. You want to learn that stuff. Check out that course there. That's where I put everything I learned from being a supervisor all the way to being a CEO. The things that you have to tack on in terms of communication skills. That's where I put that all into one course. There's many other things you got to tack on too. Financial skills, people management skills. There's other things too. But for the communication skills, I put everything I've learned right there to make that transition. I'm not expecting too many people to be here today to care about this much, but just in case you are, I also have a course on business. You will learn everything that you can learn in a brick and mortar 2-year MBA program at a university because you're getting it from the same source. You're using the same textbooks that they use in places like Harvard Business School in their MBA programs. And I've done a series of videos that takes you right through the whole thing. So if you want to learn that with me, check out that course for $100, not 100,000, 100. Okay. Best bang for the buck anywhere. The catch is that it's entirely self-study. So you got to do it yourself, but it's super flexible. You can do it on your schedule and you can go to the depth at which you want. You don't necessarily have to go deep into everything. You can just skim the material if you want and get a basic overview of all the areas of business if that's what you're looking for. Anyway, check that out if you're interested in that. I do live streams on Mondays and Fridays talking about side hustles and entrepreneurship and private equity. So that's more for kind of that crowd. But if you're looking for a cheap way to learn business so you can be more effective in your job, that's another use for it too. So there you go. All these courses, the links are in the description. Okay, perfect. We got people in the chat. Thank you for being here. Joe says, Joe, hello. I have had multiple interviews these past few weeks, most recently 6 rounds with Meta, even with a referral. Didn't get it. Not what to do. I guess don't know what to do anymore. My confidence is getting crushed. Any advice? Okay, so Joe, here's the deal. Any company that needs 6 rounds of interviews to determine if they want to hire someone, especially with recruiters, have their head up their ass. They don't know what they're doing, okay? It's either that, or everybody is so paranoid at making a decision because they don't want to be blamed if it goes wrong, that's why they do the 6 rounds of interviews. You get so many people involved that, now it's not just your decision. Everybody else signed off on it, right? That's a red flag. I don't know if that would be that great of a place to work. I know Meta. I know they're huge. I know they're well regarded in some circles, but the evidence is what we see before our eyes. If that's what they're doing, and those are their hiring practices, I don't see a lot of great people, coming through that process. It would not surprise me to learn that, I know nothing about Meta, but I would not surprise me to learn that with hiring practices like that, you may not get people staying for very long. You know what I mean? So, listen, Joe, the other thing is that the way this process works for everybody is you get tons and tons of rejection. You are going to hear no thousands of times, okay, figuratively. And, that's normal. Everybody gets that. You're not doing anything wrong. The other thing is that, you see, this process, it's not about you. It's about them, right? It's about what they happen to be looking for, okay? All we can conclude from this process is that whatever they were looking for, you weren't it, okay? Now, is that a bad thing? Not necessarily. Sometimes they're looking for people who are gullible. They're looking for people who can be exploited, okay? They're looking for mindless sheep. And I'm dead serious about this, okay? You didn't measure up. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, okay? I know it's disappointing, and I know you need a job, and you're going to get one, but don't waste too many tears over things like this, okay? There's some red flags, and you've already written, 1 sentence, 2 sentences to me, and already there's a red flag in that about their hiring process. So don't worry, you're going to be fine, Joe, okay? There's some things you can do to get hired in the posted job market, which I'm assuming was what Meta is doing. You saw a job posting, on the internet or something, and you applied for it. Okay, there's stuff you can do to maximize your odds of getting hired, and therefore shorten the lead time to getting hired. Okay, there's other things. There's a lot of other places to look to. There's stuff in the hidden job market that I suspect you might not be looking at, that you might not be pursuing. 80% of the opportunities are in the hidden job market, not the posted job market. All the jobs you see posted, that's 20% of all the jobs that are actually out there. If this is new information for you, don't take my word for this. Go do your own research on this. Learn about this stuff. You will see. But there's a lot of things you can do, Joe. Don't worry, you're going to be fine. In terms of advice, you said any advice. Okay, so listen. The biggest piece of advice in general to anyone doing this is get back on the horse and keep going, because the biggest factor in whether you get these things or not is random chance. Okay? That's the biggest factor. It's not anything that you're doing or you're not doing. It's random chance. It's always going to be the number one factor. A lot of times their ways of assessing candidates is out to lunch. It's very poor. I can say this. I taught recruiters in university. I know, at least from 5 years ago, I know the current theories of how they do things and why they do things a certain way. It's very, very imprecise. It's very hard to spot talent at the best of times. Some of the best people in the world, the smartest people in the world, that are the highest paid people in the world, can't even do it, right? Now, these people are trying to do it on a budget using entry-level employees, which is what most recruiters are, right? So good luck, right? Don't worry about it. You're going to be fine. Just, you need to get more opportunities, and it just rolls of the dice. That's all it is. Jeremy Mitchell says, good afternoon, Bill. I have several applications pending. I have the required qualifications and experience, but no feedback yet. Should I reach out to follow up? Listen, I suppose you could. I think that there's a lot better uses of your time, to be honest with you. Like if they've said to you in a job posting or something, they've said, if you want to apply for this, here's the process that we want you to go through, right? And you've done that process, okay? You should be fine. Okay, going and pestering a recruiter usually doesn't help that much. There are exceptions, they go, oh, I like the cut of your jib and I'll go and look at your application, but usually it doesn't do any good, okay? Once you get an interview, then that stuff matters more, okay? So if you are brought in for an interview and you've had the interview and then you want to follow up, right? Like you send a thank you note is usually the vehicle you use at that point. I wholeheartedly recommending putting a bit of effort into your thank you note, to your follow-up, right? Because that's when it starts to matter, okay? But if you're in the application stage, like you're going in with potentially hundreds of other applicants, sort of getting on the horn and trying to draw attention to yourself, that usually doesn't do much good if you're following the process they told you to follow. You know what I'm saying? Instead of doing that, you could be pursuing more opportunities. You could certainly be doing stuff on the hidden job market, okay, where I would advise everyone to focus most of their efforts. You know what I mean? So it's not that following up is bad. It's just that in terms of like what to spend your time on, I would do a lot of other things before I followed up with applications, is what I would say to that, Jeremy. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, this is the thing about job search. It's a numbers game, and if you've ever gotten a job before, like this isn't, you're not going for your first career job now, but if you ever had a job before, you know what I'm talking about when I say that the way this stuff usually works is that, you apply to a bunch of jobs, you do a few interviews with different employers, you give basically the same interview. You have the same resume, more or less. You've got the same answers to job interview questions, more or less. You're the same person, One company looks at you and they go, no, absolutely not. Another organization looks at you and they go, yes, you're the one. Now you haven't really changed. You've given more or less the same interview. You're the same person with the same experience, same education, same skills, etc. What's changed is the employer, right? It's much more about them than it is about you, okay? Assuming you're not making any real fundamental mistakes in how you're going about doing this, it's really about them. It's about what they just happen to be looking for. And if you just happen to be the thing that they happen to be looking for, it just lines up, right? If they're looking for some other thing that you're not, it's practically impossible to try and morph yourself into what they're looking for, especially when you don't really know it because they don't disclose, to try and be that person. You know what I mean? That's usually how this stuff goes. AJ Singh says, I went to a stage 1 30-minute trial today. Okay. I got feedback that I was teaching the children too fast and too slow. Okay. I was a bit confused about the feedback. Any advice? AJ, I'm having problems understanding what any of that means, to be honest with you. I'm not sure what a stage 1 30-minute trial is in context you're talking about. It's something to do with teaching children, and you were confused about the feedback. So no, I don't have any advice. I'd have to understand exactly what your situation is before I can say anything meaningful, unfortunately. If you want to further explain, I'll be happy to attempt it, but hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, this is the thing. Success in the posted job market, okay, if that's what you're doing, it's really based on, it's a numbers game. You need to do a lot of opportunities, and then you need to not just do a half-assed effort on each, but you have to customize your resume every time you send it out. You have to customize your application every time you send it out. And you really have to tailor it to what these people are looking, because it's not about you. It's about them. It's about what they're looking for. You have to appease them for them to say yes. It's not about you. Okay? Eric says, I'm assuming it's an assessment. Yeah, maybe it is, but it still doesn't help me. I would need to know what kind of assessment. I need to know, for a start, what industry you're in. I mean, that would be a useful start, you know? Right? So if you're applying in the post-job market, that's what it's about. Like, the days of being able to have like one resume that you keep the same and that you send out to every job you apply for, I hate to say it, but those days are over. Okay? It's going to be very, very tough to get interviews if that's what you're doing. Now, if you don't believe me, go and try it. Okay? Like, listen, you know. And the thing about this stuff is that everything is going to work some of the time, right? But that's the reality. The reality is that if you want to get anywhere in the posted job market, applying for posted jobs, you have to tailor your resume. You have to tailor your cover letter if they ask for a cover letter. If they don't ask for a cover letter, you don't need one. But if they ask for one and they want to see certain things in there, you got to tailor it, you know? Now, 5 years ago or whatever, before things like GPT and a lot of AI tools that we have now, it would have been very labor intensive to do this. It was labor intensive. It was a big deal to try and customize your resume and your cover letter and stuff to you know, the jobs you're applying to. So you could do it, but you can only apply for like 2 or 3 jobs a day, if that, something like that. Today, using AI tools, you can do both. You can customize all your applications, which you should, which will give you actual results, but you can actually do it in such a way that you can apply for 20, 30, 40, 50 of those jobs in a day with tailored resumes and tailored cover letters, okay? Now, remember, you're in charge. You're the one that's using the AI as a tool, but you're not letting it do everything for you. You're supervising it, right? You're directing it to do the right things, okay? So a lot of people think that I mean just use ChatGPT to do everything and don't even proofread it, just blast it out. That's not what I'm saying. You still have to pay attention to detail and do a good job, right? Billy RT says, I would like to know if it is a good move to shadow a team member of a department that I applied before, which I did not got the job at first. Okay, I think you already lost me here with this long sentence. Is it a good move to shadow a team member of a department that I applied before, which I did not got the job? Okay, so you applied for a job in a department, you didn't get it, but now you have the opportunity to shadow someone who works in that department. I did apply for the same position, but I did not get the job. What do you mean shadow? Like, are you working in the same company as this person in this department? Is that what you're saying? The hiring manager messaged me a week after I did not get the job. Okay. Sorry, I can't really advise you. I don't understand your situation. Like, so you're in the company and you're wanting to get a job in a department. You applied before, you didn't get it, but you're wanting to shadow. Usually shadow means you're working with the person, you're following them around all day, seeing what they do, and it's preparing you to step into their role. That's usually what shadow means. Right? Now, do you mean it in that sense? So sorry, I'm still missing some information there, Billy RT. If you could explain that, then I might be able to help you. Marcin Johansson says, is there any recommendations for how to make one's self attractive to the railroad industry, whether in operations or maintenance? I currently volunteer for a tourist railroad as a brakeman. Well, I was in the railroad for 8 years, and I was very happy to get out of it. If you had asked me this back then when I was leaving, I would say, make yourself look as dumb as possible and as problematic as possible and as uneducated as possible, and they'll love you. I had some. My experiences in the railroad. It was a very tough business. A lot of disgruntled people, a lot of tradition leading to entitlement, leading to smashing directly into modern realities. It's a weird industry. It's very, very slow moving. It's a very mature industry. The railroad's been around for hundreds of years. It's going to be around for a very long time. And that's the general prevailing attitude. They do not believe, at least when I was there, they do not believe in education. I had a university degree. I had a Bachelor of Engineering. I was surrounded by people. Nobody had a degree. Nobody really understood what engineering was. They thought I was an electrician for 8 years. You know what I mean? It was just a really weird little bubble of a world. Listen, if you want to understand that industry and understand that, that culture, you need to connect with it. So if you've been volunteering in that industry, presumably that means you're on the inside of it, right? So what you would want to do, the obvious thing would be to, strengthen the relationships that you have with people in that industry. So if you're volunteering, you'll probably report to somebody, right? And then you might have the opportunity to speak to other players, like maybe managers and things of different areas, and things like this. Go and ask those people for informational interviews would be like an obvious thing. Okay. So for example, let's pretend that you worked, I don't know, like in the railroad, it's like any other industry. There's a lot of different roles and pieces to it, right? Like for example, when I worked there, we were dealing with the locomotives. So maintenance and repair of locomotives, overhauls, things like that. And then making sure they run on the roads and they can pull trains. Other people deal with tracks. Other people dealing with shipping clients, efficiencies, financial analysis. There's all kinds of different parts to it, right? So wherever you are, go and see if you can talk to some of the managers in the areas where you would want to work, right? You can connect with them on hopefully you could do this in person, but if you want to go beyond doing it in person, you can contact people through LinkedIn or by phone internally to these companies and say listen, I'm a volunteer and I work in this department, and I was just wondering if I'd be able to sit down with you for maybe half an hour, ask you some questions about the railroad industry and where it's going from your perspective. I'm thinking of making my career in this industry, and I'd just like to learn from someone who's been in it. Would that be okay? Right now, some people will say no, some people won't respond, but some people will say yes. And so you go in there and you basically say what's your expert opinion on this industry? Where's it going? What skills are going to be needed from in the future from your perspective? Blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. And people will start to know you, right? And then if ever they're looking to hire in any of these areas where these managers are in charge of, okay, you can always reach out and say listen, I've been thinking about the stuff you said to me a couple of weeks ago when we spoke, and that's actually really cool. And I just want you to know that if ever there's an opportunity to start in your department or in this area, let me know because I'm actually quite interested, something like that. And just that personal connection like that, you've got the right attitude. They've already dealt with you. They can see you're professional and you're easy to deal with and blah, blah, blah. They like you, and you're obviously passionate about this and you have some knowledge of it. And, you have all of that'll add up to the point where they'll say, sure, yeah, there's an opening here and you can get in, So I would exploit those kind of personal relationships, either people in person, or because you already volunteer, that can give you some access and say look, I already work for the company. I volunteer here in this department. I'm just wondering if I could speak to you for half an hour. And that could open up a lot of doors. God, excuse me. That could open up a lot of doors. Reese says, I got an offer. I'm switching careers and I got an offer for a local plant. They offered me the job after their top pick backed out. I only did a phone interview and haven't met with them. Weird? It's not weird. It takes all kinds. That's not typically how it works, but it's not unheard of. Reese says, I signed the offer letter and did the drug test and sent in background check forms this morning. It seems safe, but it feels odd. Listen, it's never truly over. It's never truly over. There's always risk. Even if you start, they can still come back to you after a week and say, I'm sorry, it's not working out, or our budget got slashed and we're laying you off, or, it's never really over, Reese. It looks promising right now, and I'm sure it will stay promising. Just keep following it, just go with the flow. And, if the offer is good and everything in it checks out to you, have you accepted it? You said you got the offer, but, it says you did. You signed the offer letter and did the drug test. Okay. Now, if you sent it back to them, did they accept it? Because sometimes it's not really over technically until they receive it, and then they respond and say, yes, we received it. It's in good order. So your first day will be this day. So show up here, But that's great to hear, Reese. Congratulations. I'm happy for you. You deserve it. Billy RT says, yes, working in the same company. It is an internal move. Okay, that makes more sense. So if you shadow a team member of a department you applied for, did apply. Okay, now next question. This is like not an official thing. You're obviously taking the initiative to do this yourself, right? Nobody's telling you to shadow that employee. Nobody's approving that you shadow that employee. You're just going ahead and doing that, right? That's what I'm assuming. Okay, now what's your question? What's the question here? Team member department I applied for did not got. I would like to know if it is a good move to shadow it. I can't say that. In some situations, yes, it will be. You certainly will be able to speak to the duties of the person who's doing it now, right? So assuming they're doing the right things and you're learning from them and seeing what they do, then that helps you in understanding what the role is all about. It helps you in knowing what you should be doing to do that role right, assuming they're doing a good job, right? There's some advantages there, definitely. I can't tell you if it's a good idea. I don't know what the rules of the company are or what the situation is, but it doesn't sound like a bad idea. What would be better is strengthening your relationship with the hiring manager. That would be the thing that's going to really pay off, right? So, I'm not sure if this really contributes to that. It doesn't seem like it does. But if you could do one thing that would give you the best chances, it would be that, right? Now, maybe the person that's in the role now, the incumbent, okay, maybe they might have some influence over who the new person is, right? A lot of times they won't, but sometimes they do. They can give the boss their recommendation for like a replacement, right? Now, if they like you and they think you're doing a good job and they like having you shadow them and you guys get to know each other and, you have a good relationship, that can maybe pay off too, right? They can put your name forward and say, I recommend this person. I've been showing them my role. They seem to understand it. They seem to be able to do it. I think they would be able to certainly step into my shoes and do the role. So I recommend them. Maybe that counts for something. You can even, depending on the situation, maybe you can hit up the incumbent to give the hiring manager that recommendation for you. That's what I can say at this point. AJ Smith says, I just had a trial for a teaching job. It's principal's feedback. And the principal's feedback was that my teaching pace was inconsistent. Some is too fast, some is too slow. I'm not sure what to make of it. Okay, so this was that thing from before, right? Yes. Okay, the stage 1 business with children. Okay. Yeah, it's a matter of opinion, AJ. You know what I mean? Like unless you're doing anything really weird that fundamentally violates the rules on how to teach or something, it's a total judgment call, you know? It has nothing to do with like what method is best. Different people have different ways of teaching. And I know that some people take like education degrees. It doesn't seem to do them any good because, you know, they might learn different learning styles and all this. But in my experience, when I've met those people, they can't teach worth crap, nor can they do public speaking. They don't even know how to speak to a room full of people, let alone teach a class. That's just been my personal experiences. So I've always been a little skeptical of like what you learn in an education degree and how useful it really is to like teach a class. That when you combine the fact that teachers are hired, like certainly in university, you don't have to have ever learned how to teach. You just have to be a subject matter expert to some degree. And next thing you know, you're teaching a class. You know, like I went and did some teaching. I've never taken a course in how to teach. You know what I mean? But they just let you do it. And then nobody comes and checks up on you to see how you're doing in the class, you know? It's weird. It's a weird industry. You know, you have a whole army of administrators managing people, but yet, you know, it's just strange how they choose to spend their time. So I understand that you're not in university. You're in like, you know, secondary education or something. But, you know, it really seems to me like it's an opinion, you know? There's no right or wrong. It's just somebody's perspective on it. So unfortunately, this person, if they're the decision maker, you have to bow to their perspective because they're the one that holds the keys of whether you're going to get hired or not, right? So even if you disagree with what their opinion is on how you should teach, you know, I don't know if you have a second chance with them. If you do, you're going to have to please them. You know what I'm saying? Excuse me. Other than that, from what I know, which is not a lot, is that it's just like teaching is like HR. Like there's all kinds of theories out there, and there's some validity in some things, but the real world results, if you judge by real world results of education, we've actually been getting worse, you know, in the last several decades. So in terms of like ability to teach and things. Marson Johansson says, I've talked with retirees that volunteer as well, and I can confirm many are resistant to new technologies in the cab. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. As I said, like my impression very much was they don't value education at all. So with that, it means they're resistant to new technology. Or new things. They're very resistant to change. They're very resistant to new things coming in. And that was the culture when I was there. And it was where the specific area where I was in of the railroad. Now, I met with some people, like I met with a vice president of one of the railroads where I am in Canada. There's two major railroads. I met with one of the vice presidents, and we had lunch together, and her perspective was completely different to mine, like just polar opposite to mine. So obviously we'd had different experiences, you know. You know, so there's two sides to every story here. You know, but if you're already sort of interfacing with a lot of people, yeah, you know, like the other thing is that if you can find out who's making the decisions, like who's making the hiring decisions, because usually there will be a hiring manager and there'll be a recruiter. Now, the hiring manager will be a railroader, right? And if they're traditional, closed-minded, resistant to change, don't like new technology, they'll love you if you're like that. If you're the opposite of that, they will probably not react very well to that. If, on the other hand, you have a recruiter that's really involved in the process and they're really making the recommendations and it carries a lot of weight, and they're very much like a progressive sort of, we need to modernize, we need to hire a bunch of young, educated people that are going to bring change and all this kind of stuff, you know, they'll look favorably on that kind of stuff. So it depends on who's making the decisions and what's important to them. That's why if you can sit down with a hiring manager, it really helps, because you have to impress them, whoever they may be, whatever perspective they might have, right? So learning, about those people and contacting them, like having contact with them, will help you in knowing the person you have to impress, right? At the end of the day. And there'll be different types of hiring managers. There'll be different departments that they're looking for different things, so that's kind of the name of the game. Oh, you say, that's a good idea. Thanks for the guy. Okay, great. DM says, hi, my friend referred me for a job and I had an interview. The company is still doing internal and external interviews and I'm nervous I don't get the job. The way it works is what they do, generally speaking, what they do is they book a whole ton of interviews together, right? So they'll bring in, like, usually it traditionally was about 6 people. If they're doing virtual interviews, they might interview more than 6, like they'll maybe interview 10 or 12, right? But what they generally do is they sort of book all the interviews and schedule them. So if they have an interview with the first candidate and it goes really well, they're still going to go through and do all the other interviews too, right? Before they make a decision. They're not going to, technically, in theory, they're not going to make a decision until they've interviewed all the candidates. Now, that doesn't always happen like that, but that's usually how it's supposed to go, at least officially. So they're going to go through the rest of the interviews. It doesn't necessarily mean anything in itself. But you know what? There's no way to tell what's going through these people's minds or what's going on. Look, all you can do is just do everything that's asked of you, do the best job you can, and then it's not in your hands. It's dependent entirely on them. It's not about you. It's about what they happen to be looking for, okay? It's not about, whether you're good or bad in absolute terms. It doesn't work that way. It's based on what type of person they have in mind and that they're looking for. There's no way to discover that. There's no way to get them to reveal that. You just go and then you see what, how it turned out. It's almost like, when they make movies or they put on theater productions and they do casting, right? Who should play this role or that role? The director might have a very specific thing in mind. I want it to be a person that, they're old, but they're mean, but they're, but yet they could also play very happy and youthful and joyful. That's the way I want it portrayed in my play. I don't care that anybody who's put on that play before, they do it a completely different way. I want to do it this way, right? And you come down and you audition, and it's not about whether you're a good or bad actor. It's more about just what they have in mind, what they're going for. Do they want the audience to empathize with that character or not? It's all about them and what they happen to be looking for. That's exactly the same way it works in jobs when you're hiring, especially with recruiters and hiring managers. That's how it works, So it's a numbers game. You go down to one job, they look at you, they go, not a chance. And then you go down to another job, you basically give the same interview, you have the same background, same skills, same education, same answers to questions, basically. They look at you and they go, you're the one, you're perfect. It's like you haven't changed. They've changed. It's a different employer and they're looking for a different thing, So that's just how this works. So do your best and then keep moving forward. Keep trying to pursue new opportunities, okay, and move forward. If these people call you back, great. You'll entertain that when that happens. But in the meantime, you're moving forward and you're creating new opportunities for yourself. So whichever way it goes, you're going to be fine. Tong says, hi, Bill. Do you think certificates from academies or a master's degree is better for employability? Better than what? Do you think certificates from academies or a master's degree is better for... that's unanswerable. It depends what you're going for. For some things, they'll need a certain master's degree. It'll carry more weight. For other things, they don't give a crap about a master's degree. They care about this specific certificate. That's the standard in that little industry for that role. So, you know what I mean? Now, I said something earlier. I'm going to say again. Okay, I said this like a couple hours ago. I'm going to say this again. Here's what you do. Okay, let's say you have a certain master's degree, or you have a certain certificate, or you're thinking of getting a certain master's degree, or you're thinking about getting a certain certificate. Here's what you do. Go on LinkedIn, okay? Now, you may need the premium version of LinkedIn to do this, okay? It costs like, I don't know, $30 or whatever, but they offer, I think they still offer, do they offer that like 1 month for free of premium? So if you want, you could sign up for that and then cancel before the end of the month. It doesn't cost you anything. Anyway, get on LinkedIn and do a people search and then type in that certificate or that degree and limit the search to your hometown. Okay, so like if you're in a city, you limit it to that city and then you type in the name of the degree or the name of the certificate, right? And it's a people search. So the results are going to be individuals, right? So the results are going to be people that have that degree or that certificate somewhere in their profile. Either they have that degree or that certificate, or they're currently studying for that degree or certificate, okay? So look at these people and then go through the results. Look at what jobs they're in, okay? If they're all CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, that tells you something. If they're all working at the local donut shop or pumping gas, that tells you something else about the value of the degree and what it's good for, okay? You can also do the opposite. You can turn this on its head and instead enter the role of like what you want, what your ambition is. I want to be in this role. I want to be a vice president of engineering in the software industry. Like, I don't know, whatever, right? So enter that in. Do a people search. Limit it to your city or your region, okay? And then look at the results. There'll be individuals, people that are in that role or have been in that role because that role shows up on their profile, right? Now, look like you're basically looking at, when you look at their profile, you're looking at essentially their resume. So you can see their career track, okay? How did they get in that role? Do they all have a master's degree in a certain thing? Well, that might suggest that getting the master's degree is probably pretty important if you want to be in that role. Do they all have a certificate in this thing? Or like 90% of them all have that certificate? Well, if you want to be in that role, it might suggest that getting that certificate is something you should do. Do none of them have master's degrees or certificates? That tells you something else. You can also see their path. Like, did they need 10 years experience in this role so that they could move up into that role? You know, like if a lot of them have that they all show that pattern, that kind of tells you what you might need to do if you want to be in that role, right? So you can glean certain information like this, and then you can decide, okay, what education should I get? Should I get a master's degree or should I get a certificate? Or if I have that degree or that certificate, what does this enable me to do, right? Like, are there other people? Is this degree out there? Does it open doors for people? What are the areas that this degree enables you to get into? Like, what are the roles? What are the opportunities? You know, there might be stuff out there that you didn't realize that degree might be useful for. You never even thought of it. People in this industry over here are hiring this. Like, for example, when I started out, the first career job I got was in the railroad. We were talking about the railroad about 20 minutes ago. And I had a degree in engineering. And at the time, when I graduated from university with a degree in engineering, I just assumed I'm going to be an engineer. That's usually what you do. I mean, you design things, right? But what I found was that there was the railroad was hiring people with engineering degrees, not to do design, but to actually be supervisors and things of tradespeople. So I went for that. You know, like I never realized that, you know, that was something that you could do if you had this degree. So anyway, there's a lot of things you can do with like these kinds of searches on LinkedIn. They can give you some real world data for whatever it is you're wondering about, whatever role, whatever degree, and that might be useful for you. Prime says, a friend referred me one time to an internal job offer. They sent me a link to a job panel that hasn't been updated for 7 years by the looks of it. So it wasn't working. I found the problem and sent it to my friend. So he said he would tell them to fix it, but I didn't hear anything back. At the end, I found the job position posted publicly for some reason, which is so weird for me. Okay. Any help in such situations? No, sorry. I can't think of anything. I don't fully understand. They posted it on a website that hadn't been updated for 7 years. You found that it was also posted publicly. I'm not sure. Sorry, Prime. I'm having a little problems understanding the exact situation, but listen, if it's posted, you apply for it. There you go. If they don't call you back, oh well, you just keep moving. I wouldn't spend all this time trying to analyze what's going on. I just look, if you're looking for someone, here's my application. If you're not, okay. If this is old, obsolete, if it's a fake job, whatever, it's not working. I keep moving forward. That's how you handle it. Danielle Jones says, I meet or had lunch with the VP of site development for a new construction needing 500 people or so. I sent my resume, followed up within 7 days. He responded, I sent your resume out, keep in touch. I responded, sure, I'll follow up in 30 days. Should I do another informational interview? And I follow them, what do you think? Any advice? Well, that's kind of you're doing some weird hybrid thing here. If you're meeting a VP in the construction business, like some person that's helping to run a construction company, and they're looking for 500 people, chances are that's not a hidden job, that's a posted job. I'm assuming, I could be wrong, but I'm assuming that's a posted job. If they're looking for 500 people, presumably it's lower level people, is it labor or tradespeople? So presumably that's posted job. Presumably they have their own hiring process, usually involving a recruiter. I don't think all those 500 people are going to go through that executive, is my assumption. I don't know that for a fact, but that's my assumption. So what it seems like is this is a posted job with its own hiring process. And if you talk to the VP about it, it's not uncommon for them to simply refer you to the hiring process, right? That's usually how it goes. When there's a posted job, that's when the company has said, look, we are hiring, this is what we're hiring, and we've already created the process that we want you to follow, right? So then you show up, and then you want to go around that process by talking to people, doing informational interviews or whatever you're doing, like doing lunch with them. Usually that doesn't go well, because what they'll do is they'll say well, why are you trying to circumvent our hiring process? No, our process that we've just established, we've already told you publicly, is you apply this way, right? That kind of thing. The other thing that I don't know is this VP of site development, is that the hiring manager or not? I would suspect that they're probably not the hiring manager. There might be more than one hiring manager if they're looking for 500 people, but I don't know that for a fact. So, you know what I mean? Usually when you talk to people like this, it helps for hidden jobs that they haven't, created their official standard process they want all applicants to follow. You're doing this it's like a grassroots homespun kind of thing. There's no official process. You're talking to this person, talking to that person, and that way you could slip right through the cracks and you're in. That's usually how these things work, right? So I'm not sure how that'll go. That might work, but I would not be surprised if they simply just forward you to their official process, and it ends up that there's no real advantage having contact with this vice president of site development. But you never know. It could go different ways. I hope it works out for you, Danielle. You're welcome, DM. I'm glad to hear it. John says, did I make a mistake by asking to be compensated due to a 6-hour round trip just for fuel expenses for the interview? John, you are not spamming the chat. You are being awesome. You are doing exactly what I'd like people to do. You're asking a very thoughtful question. That's great. Listen, to speak to your question, I can't answer because I don't know the situation, and I don't know the person you're dealing with. It's going to entirely depend on them and the details of their exact situation. But as a general rule, you wouldn't do that, right? Like, there's nothing wrong in doing it. Like, you can look at it and say, well, I'm perfectly within my rights to ask for this because I'm fulfilling your request. You said, the interview's right here, and because I'm located here, I had to drive all the way, But, the thing is whether for right or for wrong, a lot of times they feel that, it's not something they would compensate you for. It's like, if you're interested in the role, this is what we want you to do. Now, if you can do that, then you get our consideration. If you're not prepared to do that, then you don't get our consideration. So if it's too much trouble for you to do it, that's fine. You don't have to do it, But we're not just like if someone showed up, if you took this to its logical conclusion and somebody came from Saudi Arabia and said like, okay, well, I just flew halfway around the globe to attend this interview for you, so I'm going to bill you for my airfare. Is that reasonable? They might say, well, we didn't ask you to do that. Now, if it's not too much trouble for you, we're happy to have you as an applicant, but we don't compensate people for doing that. If you can't pay it and you're unwilling to pay it yourself, then maybe don't apply. You know what I mean? So it's tough to say. It's tough to say what their attitude is. Now, if you still want to get in their good books, all things being equal, you wouldn't make a request of this type, right? You didn't say like, okay, I need to be compensated. That's usually not the way to get into somebody's good books, right? Even though you could make an argument that it's not unreasonable, right? You know what I'm saying? So I would say no. I would say you'd have to eat that. That's probably not the answer you're looking for, because you're trying to impress them. You're trying to create good feelings about what they feel about you, and starting off by giving them like, some extra work to do that they have to pay you is usually not going to accomplish that. So that's my 2 cents for what it's worth. But it's obviously going to depend on the situation. So that's John. Prime says the 7-year-old website is a private panel, okay? Only for referrals and internal jobs. Okay. So Prime, that was that thing. I still didn't fully understand that. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the situation is exactly. There's no harm in applying for it. If it's still valid, apply for it and see where it goes. I mean, you know what I'm saying? There's no harm in doing that. You risk your time and effort being wasted. But if you want the opportunity, then it's worth it, right? Marcia says, I'm trying to get a job as a legal secretary. Companies require 5 years of experience at a law company. What do you do if you don't have one? Graduated with honors with a degree in political science. Okay, well, Marcia, here's what I would do: is I would do some informational interviews with the decision maker. So, who hires a legal secretary? Is it in a law firm, and is it the like general partner, like the senior lawyer there that hires the staff? Like, is that usually how it works in that industry? Now, if you don't know, I would try and get in front of those people, right? Now, it could be like an office manager or something that hires is it like a paralegal, like, the legal secretary? You know what I mean? Maybe it's an office manager. So I'm not sure whose role it is to hire them. But whoever's role it is to hire, whoever is the hiring manager for a legal secretary, okay? Whoever that person is, that's the hiring manager, whether it's the lawyer or it's the office manager, I would get in front of them. I would contact them. I would try and do an informational interview with them, right? There is a video that I have that is linked in the description box under this video feed. It's a video of mine. It's called "How Successful People Get Jobs." Okay, and that basically walks you through some of the process of how you could get informational interviews with people in this industry. Okay, so watch that video. It can also be used for direct outreach. So you're not actually trying to get an informational interview. You're just putting yourself up for a job. You're saying, hello, I'm a great secretary. I, can do this for you. I can solve this problem. If ever you're looking for like an amazing legal secretary, let me know because I'd love to work for you. That's all. Have a great day. You know what I mean? Like if you're doing that direct outreach, or you're trying to do it indirectly by doing like informational interviews, it shows you the process to do that. So go watch that video. I'm not going to repeat it here. It actually shows you it as I'm doing it on the computer. Okay. But you need to get in front of these people and try and get an idea of like how they make these hiring decisions, what they look for. Because what I suspect is that, like most things, listen, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. My understanding is that law is a profession. You have to be licensed to practice law. But when it comes to a legal secretary, to my knowledge, like I assume you're in the US. I don't know if that's like a licensed profession. I'm suspecting it's not. So if that's the case, the way those industries work is that they hire who they want, right? Now, there's definitely some guidelines for what that person should have, but they make all kinds of exceptions if they like the person, usually you have roles where usually you need a bachelor degree for this, but there are exceptions. There's people in that role that don't have bachelor degrees. And how did they get hired? Oh, because they were awesome to deal with. They knew their stuff. They were very passionate about doing the role. They came highly recommended, things like this. So you want to get in front of these people and get to learn how they think, what their perception is. And if they see that you're like a highly professional person, you're easy to deal with, you got some great communication skills, you're very charismatic, they're essentially getting a free sample of what it would be like to work with you, and you guys get along great. You just click. They'll probably waive, technical requirements to do the job if you can hack it. You know what I mean? But you're going to need that personal connection, because if you're going in the front door with just a job application and everybody else has whatever degree or something or thing that they needed, 5 years of experience at a law company, and you don't, or what was it? Companies require. What do you do if you don't have one? So you don't have that experience, right? You're not going to win out by going head to head with all the other applicants. The way you're going to elevate yourself above the crowd is by having had a meeting with them, so they already know what you're like, and they like you, and they feel that you could hack the job, right? That will elevate yourself above the applicants that they haven't met. Okay? So check out that video. Hopefully that gives you some ideas of what you can do, and then I'd pursue it that way. Hopefully that helps. Okay, Marson says, for getting contact info to for hiring managers, if the manager is conservative, old-fashioned, set in their ways, I'd more likely find them through old-fashioned networking. Sure, if that's what you think, go for it. I mean, whatever. Hey, different industries could work different ways. I did this exact approach to build up my consulting business, and I was networking with CEOs. I did informational interviews exclusive with CEOs. I did dozens and dozens and dozens of these things. I can't remember. It might have been like in the hundreds. I might have done a couple hundred, maybe. It's hazy now because this was like starting 10 years ago. But it was exclusive with, if you see what I'm saying, exclusively with CEOs that I'd never met before, and they didn't know me. So that method that I'm using in that video and that I've been talking about here, I mean, that's what I did, and that's what I talk about in this course, incidentally. If you want to learn how to do that properly, get that course. There's a lot to this stuff. It isn't just one or two little tips and then bam, that all falls into place. There's a lot of principles behind these things, For example, if you're doing it on LinkedIn, what's the first thing people are going to do when you connect with them on LinkedIn or contact them? They're going to go and look at your profile. Now, if your profile has a bunch of weird stuff on it, yeah, it can negate anything you're actually doing and whatever message you're sending and all this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So there's a lot to this stuff. But my point is that I was dealing with people that are old, CEOs are old. I was like a very young CEO. CEOs are old. They're like 60s and up, at least in my experience. It varies by industry. Certainly in tech industries, you get a lot younger people, but you want to talk about conservative old people? Yeah, that's the crowd I was dealing with and that I still deal with. You know what I mean? And thinking that they're not on LinkedIn is false, because they are. Okay, Marcia says no need to have a license. Okay, good, because that's kind of what I assumed there. Well, thank you, Marcia. That's very kind. Best of luck. Best of luck to you. You deserve it. Danielle says, thank you. To clarify, he is the VP of the site. They're building a new unit working with outside contractors. I was networking with him to get recommendations with companies when the phase 1 started. Okay. Well, that's more encouraging. Okay, well, that could go somewhere. I mean, it's just that if they end by recommending you just apply through standard channels, that's very disappointing. That's usually the end of any kind of potential for having that relationship. You know what I mean? But, whatever, do it. Like, whatever they recommended, you just do it and see where it goes. You're welcome, Danielle Jones. Marson says, sounds like the general idea is to make the largest impression you can, so you stick out in their mind when they're thinking about the applicants. Now, this was in relation to what? Marson. Okay, for managers, more progressive, flexible. I wouldn't put it that way necessarily. That's certainly not the way to get hired through recruiters. If that's what we're talking about, you want to kind of do the opposite of that. It's easy to be memorable. You want to be memorable in a job interview? Here's what you do. Show up with no pants, drunk, pass out, throw up on the table all over the recruiter, pass out, okay, and then have to be carried away in a net. That's memorable, okay? Will that get you the job? Of course not, right? Obviously, this is ridiculous what I'm saying, but you see, they're not looking for someone necessarily to stand out in that sense. They're looking for someone, at least recruiters are, they're looking for someone who fits the requirements of the job better than anyone else. And then on top of that, if their little checklist of stuff is all like check, there's no red flags, meaning that they want the job, there's no risk factors in their background, they're passionate, they've got great communication skills, they're professional, they can answer all the questions properly, you know what I mean? It's really not a lot of positives, it's a lot of lack of cons is what they're looking for. They're looking for red flags, and if they didn't find any, and you have all the requirements for the job and some of the nice to haves, That's what stands out to them. Okay. It's not about being memorable in a conventional sense, right? For hiring managers, if you're doing it through networking, usually the way it works is, unless you're contacting them from some position of power, which you're not if you want a job, it's basically about how well they get along with you and how they like you. And, you get points for basically, I think a prerequisite is that you have to seem like you know what you're talking about, right? So when you talk about the industry or whatever you guys talk about, you have to ask intelligent questions. You have to get what they're saying and understand everything they're saying, and ask very insightful follow-up questions and things like this. So they get a vibe that you know what you're talking about. You understand this stuff, right? And then the big thing that's going to push it over the edge is, do they like you? Do they enjoy dealing with you? When the interview or the meeting is over, do they feel a little sad that it's over? If so, that's a really good thing in your court. If they feel happy that it's over, then it's probably not going to lead to anything, right? That's usually how these things go. Okay, so it's not necessarily about standing out in the sense that you're really memorable and really unique. That's not what they need for an employee. They need someone who does their job, that gets it right, that's awesome. And you know what? That's kind of boring. That's the employee you don't usually hear from a lot. You usually hear a lot from the troublemakers, the ones that screw up constantly. Those are the ones you keep hearing from. I mean, there are exceptions. If you're trying to get a sales role or something like that, then maybe there's slightly different rules. But I'm talking across the board for most positions they hire for, worker level. Prime says, can you give advice on breaking into top companies like Google, Microsoft, AI? How should one approach them? Is it a good idea to call the executives personally and try to sell yourself? I wouldn't do that. I mean, you have two options. You have the post a job method, right? Which is not this. That's where you appease the recruiter. You go in at the bottom and try and go up internally, right? You enter at the bottom and then try and go up. So you're dealing with the recruiter. And the way to pass that, as you guys probably know, is you just give them everything that they're asking for, right? And you just happen to have to be the person that they're looking for, that type of person. The alternative is to do it through networking. You can do it through direct outreach. You can do it for big companies too. Different companies might have certain rigid procedures about that, but you can usually get around that by going to executives, because executives can do what they damn well please. They can talk to anyone they want, and their entire job is focused on that, right? Executives need to be able to talk to whoever they want. They don't give a crap about any kind of weird official policy that limits that. That's stupid. It impedes them from doing their job, so there won't be any that apply to executives. For people lower down, like mid-level managers, in some large organizations, you might even get formal policies that govern that stuff, right? The way it usually works is that mid-level managers, they usually don't take unsolicited queries from the public. In most organizations, there's no official policy about that, but they just don't because it's not part of their job. It's not part of their duties, right? But executives, that's the key part of their role. They take, unsolicited queries from outside the company all the time. That's what they do, in terms of working with partners, setting up joint ventures, dealing with new suppliers, dealing with regulators, just talking to competitors or other players in the industry. I mean, that's what their role is all about. And a lot of their time is freed up to do that. They're not as busy as mid-level managers. Mid-level managers, their time is booked up for meetings and all kinds of things. Executives, they have a lot more unstructured time because they're just doing all these random things. So when you contact an executive, they are freed up. Their whole job is related to that. It's very rare that if you send something to an executive, and it's not stupid, this is the assumption, it's not idiotic, you're not going to get Who are you? How did you get this number? Why are you talking to me? No, go away. I don't know what you want. You're not going to get that reaction from an executive because their role is to deal with people outside the company. You probably will get that reaction if you send that to a mid-level manager because their job, like a plant manager or something like that, their role is not dealing with people outside the company. Their role is usually exclusively dealing with internal people for internal matters. You know what I'm saying? Right? So you can bypass that by going to executives, but I would not advise you like doing that when you don't know anything about anything. You're probably not going to say the right thing. You're probably going to talk to the wrong person. You know what I mean? You could try it through trial and error, but I mean, you're probably going to get a lot of negative results, like to learn it the hard way. I'd like learn all that stuff first, right? Yes, I want you to learn it if you're going to learn it with me, that's all in that course. Yes. But there's a lot of principles involved. If you don't know what these people do, you don't know what their roles involve. It's hard to know what's appropriate to say to what person or what channel, you know what I mean? So even companies like big companies, like these are among the biggest companies in the world, right? I mean, I don't know about OpenAI, I don't know about Microsoft, but Google certainly is. You know what I mean? It's the same rules apply, right? And I wouldn't call them up, right? You can, but I wouldn't do that for a variety of reasons. Marson says, understood. I was asking for the perspective of a hiring manager, but that makes sense. Okay. Marson says, yeah, I don't want to make an impression in pajamas or a bottle of Jack Daniels or a reverse handle. A reverser handle, right on, yeah. You got to put the reverser in, then you pound it in, throw it into forward, and then notch 8. That's what I remember. And then half the time, when I was dealing with it in the environment in which I was dealing with, you throw it to notch 8 and you hear a big bang somewhere in the engine compartment of the locomotive as a piston gets shot out the side of the engine block. It's wonderful. Prime says, how do I figure what to say and who to say it to? Well, you take my course. Prime. Listen, watch that video that I've been constantly recommending. It's in the description box. It's called How Successful People Get Jobs. That should give you some ideas, okay? That can show you how to do a lot of things. Also, the job might need me to relocate. I need to show them to be an exception. Okay, now this job, can you give advice on break companies like... So the job with the big companies is going to require you to relocate? Okay. Yeah, like listen. Okay, look. You're outside of a company. You want to be employed by the company. Now you have a couple of different choices. You could either start at the bottom and then go up internally, which means like, you apply for a job, deal with the recruiter, and then see if they select you, and then you go up internally. Or you could start at the top. You start with the executives and you go down, right? And I used to teach a course in business school where it was about networking, and we did this thing. And what I did was I showed all the students, like, this is like how using things like Google Maps and LinkedIn, this is how you can contact people at companies and you can get in. You can get informational interviews with these different people, right? And then whatever you're wanting from then on, it splits off. If you're looking for a job, you can get that. If you're looking to partner with them, like as a contractor or something, you can get that. If you're just looking to learn, like you're a student, you're looking to see if you want to go into that industry and make your career in that industry, so you want them to give you a tour and kind of give you some insights into it, you can get that. There's like it just splits off into like these different goals that you might have, right? And what I got the students to do was to start with the CEO. So, when you contact the company, start at the top, start with the CEO, and then go down, right? So what that usually involved was having an informational interview with the CEO of the company. So all the students had to, for this course, they all had to go out and get informational interviews with the CEOs of companies in our town here, our city. And, they didn't know these people. I didn't know these people. They had to go and, learn how this stuff works, learn what to say, and make it happen, and it is a numbers game. Some people will say no, and some people won't respond, but some people will say yes. So, you do it just like applying for jobs. Most people, you don't hear back, but some people occasionally say yes, and they invite you in. In this case, it would be for a job interview, right? But it's the same idea, right? So basically, you start at the top and work down. Now, pretty much almost all the students in the class, every time I taught this for a couple of years, I think 3 years, they all got informational interviews with CEOs. Like there was a couple of like 1 or 2 exceptions that didn't manage to pull this off, but pretty much almost everybody did. And then some people, they ended up getting jobs. Other people, they got tours. Other people, they just had a couple of informational interviews they had the CEO, and then they did one with somebody lower down in a department that they actually cared more about, right? So it kind of split off from there. But the goal was to teach them networking, to teach them like what you can do, right? So whatever information that you're looking for about an industry or whatever, it exists out there in somebody's mind. Now, you need to find out who that person is, be able to contact them, to be able to sit down with them and ask them questions, and they can give you that information, whatever it is, right? So that was the idea behind it. So it was always better to start at the top and move down than it was much harder to start at the bottom and go up, that's the thing. So like a couple of students got hired doing this, and I've said this a couple of times since then, but one of the students had the CEO of the company hand the director of HR their resume and say, like, look into this person. It's pretty powerful when it's coming down from the CEO. Do you think the director of HR is going to say, no, I got my own process to filter people, right? No, what they're going to say is, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, and they're just going to do it. You know what I mean? So, like, that's the advantage in this, right? If you know who to contact and what to say and how to present yourself, a lot of people say no, some people say yes. And of the ones that say yes, you line up a bunch of informational interviews. You're meeting with like some pretty important people in your industry, right? And sometimes it just doesn't really click and it doesn't go anywhere, but a lot of times it does. And either you can go back to them for a job, or you can hit them up as like a contact, and like ask some questions and stuff in the future and things like this. Or you can kind of sleep on it, and then maybe a month later you see that company posts a job, right? You might be able to do something with that, or you just keep pursuing hidden jobs or whatever. It can go a variety of different ways. But this is stuff that we did. And I don't know why I'm talking about this, but like one of the things was the students got bonus points for sending in a selfie with them and the person they did an informational interview with, which was usually the CEO. So we got a lot of my students that, had all selfies, like shaking the hand of the CEOs of various companies in my hometown. And some of them were like the big companies, So, but it's like learning like how this stuff works and what these people actually do. Most people, they start off, especially young people, they start off with this attitude that like, who am I to even like talk to that person? Like they're up there, I'm down here. So I'm not going to bother because no good will come of it. And it's like, the problem is that everybody who can do something for you, whether it's give you a job or recommend you to someone or whatever, they're all like above your level. You know what I'm saying? You can't have a problem with like talking to people just because they're above your level. Those are the people that can help you. People that are at your level or lower, they can't really do anything for you. They don't know anything. They don't have any power to hire you or whatever, work with you. So you have to realize that as like the very first step. Because I always started that course with the students saying, that can't be done. I don't even want to bother because it's an impossible task. And then you show them like, here's all the selfies of all the students that have actually done it. And they go, oh, okay. and then they're willing to entertain it, right? You know? So, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm a former CEO. I mean, it's not this weird, untouchable thing that like you're some kind of, you know, person way up that, you know, you don't even associate it with like people that need jobs. So it's like, no. Most companies are small. Also, that's the other thing. Most companies, I mean, I don't know, you can look it up in your region, whatever country you're in, whatever region of the country you're in, you can look up. The government will usually publish this information. They'll tell you, here's the average size of companies in this region. Here's the average number of employees in those companies, you know, and like where I am, the average size of company is like 20 employees or something. You know what I mean? You get companies that have like, you know, 50,000 employees, but you also get a lot of companies that have like 3 employees. You know what I mean? So the average size is about 20 employees. When I had a company, you know, it was like in the range of like 40, 50 employees, you know what I mean? But that's like more typical than you think. So these people are not like elites that are like celebrities or something that you can't talk to them. If you approach them, you say something that's professional, that's legitimate, makes a lot of sense. You have a reasonable request that they can easily grant. If they check you out, like they look at your LinkedIn profile or something, like there's no red flags, you look above board, everything checks out. There's no reason why you can't contact these people. These people would love to get talented employees that are passionate about doing a certain job, that have some communication skills, that are professional. You know what I mean? Like these are the types of people that those companies want, you know? So in a way, it's like they're hoping, on some level, they're hoping you'll contact them. That's usually how they find great employees, you know? Right? So anyway, that's kind of neither here nor there, but I mean, this is where this stuff can go. This is where I'm coming from, okay? And it varies by industry, but generally these are, at least in my experience, have been pretty much universal concepts. Also, the job might need me to relocate, and I need to show them to be an exception. Yeah, Prime says I need to show I'm a unicorn. Are you being sarcastic, or is that like literally what you think? I don't know how you mean that, but this is going to sound weird. But if I was the CEO or I was the person you were trying to impress, and you want to show me you're a unicorn, but yet you're going for like a low-level job or whatever it is. I mean, I don't know. This is probably going to sound really bad. I kind of hesitate to say this, but I'd almost say like the fact that you're here kind of almost shows you're not a unicorn. You know what I mean? So I'm not expecting you to be the next Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or, you know, Thomas Edison. You know, like if you were the next Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or Thomas Edison, you would have already started your company and you'd be in the process of putting me out of business. You know, but maybe that's neither here nor there. Prime has sent a super chat. Thank you, Prime. I appreciate it. That's really awesome of you. And, you know, you are asking some pretty intelligent things. You're getting me to talk about this kind of networking stuff, and that's kind of what I like. I haven't talked about that stuff other than my YouTube channel for a very long time. Marson says, that's a powerful moment when the CEO hands the HR director. Yes, it is. And that happened to one of my students. So, you know, yeah. And they did this right in front of the student. So, I mean, that's even better. They called supposedly alleged. This story comes to me secondhand, so I don't know. But supposedly they were having, the student was in the CEO's office. They were talking. The CEO called in the HR director and said, can you come in here for a moment? And then they handed the HR director the resume and said, like, look into this or something. Right in front of the student. Like, that was their resume. So that's the story. They ended up getting hired. So I'm assuming that's how they got hired, you know. But it goes to show you, I mean, you can make a good impression, you know. Here comes a young person who's passionate about, working in the industry. They obviously said the right things. They sort of like showed interest, and they asked very intelligent questions. They got the CEO like talking all about it. And, they obviously came across as professional and charismatic, and, and basically I'm assuming the CEO said like, wow, you're exactly the kind of person that we want here. You've got all the stuff that we're looking for. You're passionate about this, and you've got some initiative. You're talking to me, and you're impressing me, so it led to good things. John says, sorry, I wasn't on the live earlier. I might not have shot myself in the foot by asking, it's not necessary, but it would take my full day and cost me $40 to fuel to be able to come out for the interview. I previously asked for compensation for coming out to Raleigh-Durham area from Myrtle Beach. My wife is from near there. A 3-hour drive. Okay, well, if you had previously discussed it, like, are you going to compensate me? Can you compensate me for coming all the way out to make the trip? And they said yes, then it's not an unreasonable request once you've actually done it. You know what I'm saying? So that changes things a bit. Danielle Jones says, are my attempts at finding a job, what I shared on the live today, considered networking or something else? Because I think I'm networking, but I may be doing it wrong. Listen, Danielle, all networking is it's people communicating with other people. That's all networking is. Now, that's an umbrella term for many, many different things. Okay? I don't know if anyone's really tried to like make a catalog of all the different ways you could get a job, or you know what I mean, or promote yourself. Maybe in sales they might have done that somewhere. Somebody probably has that. But I mean, the thing is, there's no rules. This is the thing. Like, it's not like almost any other process that some people do, like where, somebody comes and says, here's how it works. Here's the process. Step 1, you do this. Step 2, you do. Step 3. The way we do this is we need this. So then you provide this. It's like there isn't anything like that. It's totally, like, I don't know what you call it. Like, it's just a free for all, Like, somebody walks down the street, you could come up to them and talk to them, right? Now, you can go up and do that and have it fail miserably. They don't want to talk to you because you seem really weird and, off-putting. Or you could do it in like a way where you look good and you sound good and you say the right things, and it makes them want to talk to you. And if they have a request of some kind, it makes them want to say yes. It's like a reasonable thing I can do. And it seems to tie in with some of my own goals. And so, yeah, it's not a problem, right? There's just no rules for this stuff. It's kind of whatever works. And the only real formalization of this stuff that I've ever seen is in the context of sales, right? Like business development. Not like low-level business development where you get like people that just are terrible at what they do, like blasting out emails and messages where they talk all about themselves, and you just delete it as spam essentially. But higher level sort of sales where you build relationships with people, right? Diplomats and things really understand this stuff, like diplomacy. In political science, they know a little bit of this. You know what I mean? Certainly in sociology, and a little bit is in psychology. And in business, they study something called organizational behavior, which talks about elements of this, but it's basically about like reaching out to people and persuading them to do something that helps you. And usually the way you do that is you help them. You give them something they want, So, I mean, as you can appreciate, there's many, many different types of activities you could do. Think of it in terms of getting a job. I mean, people go to job fairs and they network in the sense that, you go from, if you're a student or something, you go from booth to booth for all these different companies, and you talk to the person there. You say, hey, so what's going on here? Ooh, hydroelectricity. I understand that there's some opportunities in that, Can you tell me about it? And they go, certainly, yeah. We offer a ton of opportunities and it's very exciting. We're doing this and that, and then you give them business cards or resumes or whatever. You get their cards so you know who you talk to. You can maybe come home and then follow up the next day with them or somebody else at the company. There's no rules. It's just, there's a lot of things you can do. People like to network, especially like extroverted people like to network, and they go to events, right? And they go to wine and cheese parties and industry events and trade shows and conferences and award ceremonies, and there's all kinds of things going on. Whatever's going on in your industry, you can do it that way. I personally hate that stuff. I find it extremely inefficient. Being in like a room with a bunch of strangers, kind of mingling, schmoozing. I hate it. Going up to, there might be a room full of 100 people, and then you talk to about 5 of them over the course of an hour. At least that's kind of my experience, and it's just extremely inefficient. But other people love that, and they do it that way, and they're quite successful at it. But I mean, I'm an introvert, so I try and do networking using social networking to target who you want to talk to. And then only when the person is interested in wanting to speak to you, do you go beyond that? Do you actually go and like meet them or something? That's how I've always liked to do it, because I'm an introvert, and I encourage that sort of networking to introverts. A lot of introverts don't do any networking. In my experience, it derives from a lack of respect and misunderstanding of what networking is. They think it's all favoritism, nepotism, cronyism, where you do favors for people who because of like corruption or something. It's like, no, that's not what it is. If I'm running a business and I, every once in a while I got to hire somebody, I'd like to hire someone that's good. And how do you find out about the good people out there? You network, you connect with them, And if you've been dealing with somebody at a competing company for years and they're good, if you're looking for, you have a vacancy or something, you need a salesperson or something, I'd like to get that person, Now, if I already kind of deal with them every once in a while and I know of them, and maybe they're leaving their company, it's like, it's natural for them to come work for me, So it's to my advantage to do this. But there's many, many different things you can do within that world of networking. It's just people talking to other people over many different channels. Like email, face-to-face, direct message, everything. Sorry, another rambling trip to nowhere, but it's loosely related to what you were talking about, I think. I hope. That was Danielle. Tong says, what do you think about addressing a gap year when applying for jobs? I graduated 2 years ago with a degree in computer science and took a year for travel. Now I'm back. I'm struggling to get interviews and don't know what to put on my CV for this gap. Is it better to lie and make it seem like I was doing stuff or what? I feel companies might not like someone who just traveled instead of working. That would be a great thing to do informational interviews with people on, because first of all, they can tell you what they think. And then secondly, you can bypass the whole issue and get hired because you've been talking to them. The conventional wisdom is, if it's more than 6 months, you might have some problems in hiding it. Okay? Like if you see, recruiters they're trained to look for like work gaps. Okay? Not all of them do, but generally they're trained to look for that. They're trained to look for current work gaps. So not a work gap in your past, but one right now. So what you're describing is a current work gap. They're also trained to view it as a liability. The reasoning goes that if you're not working, you haven't been able to find work, maybe there's a reason for that we don't know. It might be a red flag. Oh, sure, you're explaining it away, but how do we know that's the truth? We don't. So they categorize you as a high-risk employee because of that, right? If you get a job in the hidden job market through networking, they don't give a rat's ass about this kind of thing. It's a moot point, right? But if you're going through recruiters, this might be an issue. Now, the only thing I know that works, or that has a likelihood of working, is if you can say, it wasn't that I was unemployed, it's that I went back to school. Okay? I made a calculated strategic decision. In your case, you didn't quit a job to go back to school, but you just came out of school and then went back to school. But you could say, like, look, I got my degree, and it's good and everything, and it adds a lot of value, but I felt that there was more to learn. My skills ironically weren't completely up to date. There's been a lot of change recently, and I wanted to educate myself in those areas and fully round out my skills so I'd be even more competitive. So I did that, and now that I've done that, I'm ready to rejoin the workforce, and here I am. That's what brings me here. So in order to make that story fly, you'd have had to take some training during your year off, okay, or whatever it is, this year that you're traveling around Europe or whatever. In order to not be a complete lie when you say this, I would go out right now, I'd register for some free online courses, I'd take a couple of courses, then you can say truthfully, like, I've been taking training. I took this, maybe some stuff with AI, some really new stuff, now that I've rounded out my skills, they're au courant, now I'm ready to be employed, And you could try that. You don't have to hide anything, and it's not even a lie, because if you take a couple of classes or whatever, you've added some value, Marson says, that's a great point. My volunteer railroad is always looking for more volunteers. I was onboarded through their guest engineer program where the CEO was the brakeman for that train order. Oh, okay. What railroad? I'm curious what railroad. I used to know, what was that guy's name? The CEO of, I can't remember. I've worked for both railroads in Canada. I can't remember. Hunter Thompson was the guy. Marson says, off topic, Myrtle Beach has great weather and great beaches. Sadly, they don't have passenger service direct with Amtrak. A bus has to be used. Oh, right on. If you wanna travel somewhere in style over long distances, go by bus. That's all I'm going to say. Vasco says, I just came here to thank you for the tip about leaving the toxic company I was in. I changed companies and I feel like I'm in another world. Thank you sincerely for your opinion. Well, congratulations, Vasco. That's great to hear. I'm glad that you're prospering, and I'm glad that it really feels like a step forward. So that's awesome. Way to go. And thank you for letting me know. It's nice to hear that kind of thing. Akiz says, I aim to apply for a remote job from my country in a country I worked in for 8 years. Should I contact the CEO directly on LinkedIn, as you are suggesting? The job is not posted. I want to present my case. What I would do, Akiz, is I would learn how to do it properly first. Because just writing a semi-incoherent, grammatically incorrect, scattered message to a CEO is probably not going to get you anywhere. And the way these things work, what I'm advocating for is not that you do like a very targeted single communication to one person. It's almost like job search where you're applying to many things, right? Because the odds are that they will not respond, or they will not respond favorably. Just like when you apply for jobs, most of the time they don't call you back for an interview. It's a no, right? But sometimes they do, right? So that's a very important principle. It's not about one targeted thing and then you just sit back and wait for it to pay off. It's like, that's not how it works, you know? Okay, so I would learn how this stuff works before you, or as much as you possibly can before you just jump into it, okay? But you got the right idea. You can, like, don't do it because I suggested it. Do your own research, learn about how this stuff works, learn about how people work and how businesses work, like how organizations work in terms of the sociology and the communication, right? And then what people's roles are and, all this kind of stuff. And then once you know that stuff, then it starts to fall into place what to do, Marson says, that's why a CIA agent won't say they work for the CIA. They will say they work for the State Department, for the U.S., lots of networking ops. Okay. Danielle Jones, I understand better. Thank you. Good. Marson says, this is a small railroad, the Corporation of Charlotte Valley. Oh, okay. Tong says, that's great advice. Thanks, Bill. Awesome. Well, there are 40 people here. I'm going to wind this down because, quite frankly, I'm getting hoarse. I've been talking for something like 4 hours, so I'm gonna wind it down. But I want to thank everyone. There's 40 people here. Thank you for being here. Listen, learn all you can about hiring, about how this stuff works. I've got some courses. This one in particular, I think a lot of people might be interested in. There's a link in the description. Check that out. I've also done videos where I explain like what the course is. It's like FAQs, frequently asked questions. So to try and make it as transparent as possible, you can see exactly how it works and what you get, and to make a more informed decision. If, on the other hand, you're wanting to climb the ladder and you're wanting to learn more professional communication skills, I have this course here, which is another quite popular course. This is basically everything that I've learned since starting out as a supervisor and then going all the way to a CEO. This is all the communication skills that I've had to learn. It talks about like writing and very basic stuff, and it talks about sort of mid-level ideas, about how to persuade people and stuff, and then it talks about higher level things, like responses, persuasion, delivering bad news, all that kind of stuff. That can help you be seen as a contender for higher level jobs. If you're in a role like in a business and you want to move up the ladder, that's one of the things that you have to tack on is good communication skills. Finally, if you want to learn business, this I assume less people here will care about this, but if you do want to learn business, check out that. That's where you learn everything that you would learn in an MBA, a Master's of Business Administration. So it's more of a program than a course, but you can learn anything or everything that you would learn in a brick and mortar, university delivered Master's of Business Administration program, because you're using the same source. You're using the same textbooks. You get a reading list, and then you get a whole bunch of videos from me that guide you through the whole thing. So it's $100, not $100,000, $100. So it's amazing bang for the buck. You're using the same textbooks they use in places like Harvard Business School in their MBA programs for different courses. So if that's a goal of yours, the reason why people here might be interested in that is if you're in a conventional career, you're in a job, and you just want to excel at that job, you want to be seen as management material, you want to understand business and what are the ways business thinks and what's important to it and all this kind of stuff. Having a general knowledge of that is just, I think it's good for everyone, especially if, we're dealing with employment, right? Definitely useful. But all these courses, they're linked in the descriptions, and I have videos describing each one so you can see exactly how it works. So check those out. I will be back in 2 days. I'll be back on Friday. I'm doing a live stream on Friday. I'm doing a short one on private equity, which I do every Friday. And then I'm doing another one of these, Honest HR Nitrous, where we talk about job search and the realities of that stuff and why it might not be working or what you can do. Just general Q&A. Thank you to everybody who participated. To Tong, to Marson, to Vasco, to John, to Prime, to Danielle, to Marsha, and everybody else. You guys are awesome. I will see you very soon. Take care. Best of luck. And always remember, you're awesome.